our deceased Charleston Day members.
He didn't have to wake me early this morning, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. I said he didn't have to wake me early this morning, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to save my soul one day, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to keep on begging away. He did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. I can't thank him enough. I can't love him enough. I can't lift him too high. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good God been to me. Oh, 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 oh. He didn't have to bring me to sing his praises, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to give me a measure of faith, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to heal me again and again, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to give me another chance, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. I can't thank him enough. I can't love him enough. I can't lift him too high. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good God been to me. Oh, 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 oh. He didn't have to hang and die on the cross, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to ensure that my soul would be lost, but he did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. He didn't have to suffer till he could take no more, but he did. He did. Yes, he did. I'm so glad he washed me white as snow. He did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. I can't thank him enough. I can't love him enough. I can't lift him too high. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good God been to me. Oh, 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 he did. Yes, he did. 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 Save my soul. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. Made me whole. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. Healed me. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. Set me free. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. Gave me a hope. He did. Yes, he did. I love my enemy. He did. Yes, he did. He did it. Oh, he did. Didn't nobody do it, but Jesus did. He spared my life. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Gave me another chance. He did it. He did. Yes, he did. He did. Yes, he did. Oh, my life have been changed. Oh, my life have been changed. Oh, I can't thank him enough. I can't love him enough. I can't lift him too high. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good. I tell you don't know how good God been to me.
Wonderful. Next on our program, we will have our introduction of speaker, Mr. Evan Johnson, National President, Chicago.
Thank you to the mistress of ceremony, Charleston Chapter President, the honored guests on the stage, and to the audience. My task here tonight is to introduce our speaker, and some of us know him as Willie B. Peacock, but we call him Wazir Peacock is the name, but a lot of us remember him as Willie B. I could tell you about his academic achievements, and you can read about some of those in the souvenir book that those of you have them. You can read about him in that bio. And I could also tell you about his lifetime accomplishments or what he's doing now. I could tell you about his titles that he's had or the one that he have now. But I hope you will be gracious enough to allow me a couple of minutes to tell you why some of us want to just say thank you to Mr. Peacock for his contributions that he helped to make the world a better place for all of us. There's a scripture that says, "You are a liar if you say that you love God who you have never seen, and you don't love your brother who you have seen or you see every day." As a young man, Mr. Peacock showed a love and compassion for his fellow man. He put his life on the line because he hated unfairness and injustice, and I don't think he did it for fame and fortune. Mr. Peacock, I can imagine that there were some days that you were hungry and some nights that you didn't know where you were going to lay your head. But Mr. Peacock made those sacrifices because he wasn't one of those kind of people who say, "I love God," but he did nothing for his fellow man. There's a story that a wise man once told, and he put it in the form of a parable. And he asked his students to put themselves in the place of God, because that's what parables really are. When they talk about the man in the parables, the man is usually God. And the parable was this: if you had 6 children, 2 boys, 4 girls, and you taught them to love each other and to help each other out and to be there for each other in time of needs, and you had the one son that told everybody that he met that he loved you, and he praised you, and he gave you credit, and he honored you at all times. But he had no compassion for his brothers and sisters and did nothing to help them in their time of need. And he had another son who didn't talk very much, but he loved him and respected him, but he didn't say anything. But every time one of his sisters or brothers needed help, he was there. And their pain was his pain. So the question was, which son would you be most proud of? The one that bragged and boasted and prayed and praised and told everybody that he loved you, but he did nothing to help his brothers and sisters? Or the son that didn't say very much, but he did everything that you had taught him to do? That was the question, and that's the question for you, Charleston. Mr. Peacock, our speaker tonight, at a young age when most men would only be concerned about having fun, he showed a healthy respect for God and the spiritual side of man, but he also had compassion for his fellow man and was willing to put his life on the line to make changes that he saw as social injustice. And we can thank his mother and father, Mrs. Della Martin Peacock and Mr. George Washington Peacock, for instilling those divine qualities in him. And most of us know that Mr. Peacock was an organizer in the civil rights movement. And my final point is a few things about the civil rights movement so that you can understand the historical significance of Mr. Peacock's contributions. Now, we all know the story about Dr. Martin Luther King and Rosa Parks in Montgomery, Alabama, when she refused to get up. They integrated public transportation. So that aspect of the civil rights movement was a contribution that was made in Alabama. Now, all the civil rights organizations helped each other out, and they lended support to each other in whatever endeavor that they were trying to carry on. The NAACP was known for the court fights that they put on, and Thurgood Marshall led their legal team, and they were the one who went to the Supreme Court and got the verdict that led to the integration of public schools. And integration of the lunch counters, that was an aspect that came to us mostly from the East Coast. You had to sit in at the lunch counters in North Carolina, South Carolina, even in Jackson, Mississippi at one point. But that was an aspect of the civil rights movement that mostly came from college students on the East Coast. But Mississippi can take credit for the voters' rights drive. That was centered in Mississippi, even though we had people that came from all over the nation, black and white, to help with the movement. But it was local blacks who had to register, because if you were from someplace else, you could not register to vote. So you need an organizer to go out on the street to first persuade those people to come and register and to help them to acquire the right to vote. Now that drive was centered in Greenwood, Mississippi, 40 miles from here. And Stokely Carmichael, who was one of the famous people who came down to Mississippi to help out with the voters' rights drive, he said in his biography that that movement in Greenwood, Mississippi was not started by liberators from the North. It was started by 2 college students from Mississippi, and one of them was Sam Block, and the other was our own Wazir Peacock, our speaker tonight. So Charleston, because we know that you can't say you love God whom you've never seen and not love your brother, and because we are grateful for those who sacrifice for us, can we give a warm round of applause for one of our own, Mr. Wazir Peacock? Thank you.
We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder. We are climbing Jacob's ladder, soldiers of the cross. I bring you greetings from the Bay Area, veterans of the Civil Rights Movement of California. It is indeed an honor, and I consider it a privilege, to be officially invited back home to Charleston Day for Charleston Day to Charleston, Mississippi, giving the honor and the glory to God and all of the great messengers and prophets that God has sent to earth to redeem man, and giving the highest and great recognition to those, that is, some of those, who made great sacrifices for the cause of freedom, because they knew that freedom ain't free. They dedicated their whole life to the freedom struggle. And I'll name a few that most of us know or have heard about. Kwame Ture, some know him as Stokely Carmichael. Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., Fannie Lou Hamer, Jack Menace, that great researcher for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, William Consular, that great attorney who fought for the people in that prison up there in New York and all over the South for us. Medgar Evers, James Farmer, James Farman, James Chaney, Andrew Goodman, Michael Swerner, Viola Leozo. Now to bring it all the way home, Amzie Moore, E.W. Steptoe, C.C. Bryant, Vernon Damer, Herbert Lee, Gus Coates, George Lee, and our own Bertia Kegler. I stand here before you because of you. Charleston, with the help of God, you have made me what I am, and I am grateful. My growing up in Charleston was a wonderful experience. I had my biological parents, and I had my other parents, such as Mr. Eddie Johnson and Sally Johnson. We call her Miss Sis Walker. Mrs. Elizabeth Kegler, I always call her Miss Tina. As she said, I was at her home all the time. Me and Johnny Boy, who was Morgan Kegler Jr., me and Johnny Boy was inseparable. And I was a silly boy. Anything he did made me laugh. Of course, there was Miss Nellie Tennant, Big Jim, we call her. I felt so secure in the confines of their love and tutelage. But a drastic change was about to happen in my life that would change me forever. Come with me if you will. I invite you to come along on this journey with me. The year was 1949. The month was March, about the middle of March. Johnny Boy and I walked to school that morning. It was a nice sunny winter day, but when I returned home that afternoon, a big open bed truck was in my yard. and my father was helping the man load this truck. It clicked in my mind, we are moving. Nobody told me that we are moving. The next thing I realized, hey, I am on the back of that truck going God knows where. When the truck stopped, we were on H.C. Strider's plantation. It was a traumatic experience, to say the least. Why is this happening? This question was gradually being answered. Suffice it to say, without going into great detail, the answer and the reason did come. But it was not satisfying. Here I was in the middle of nowhere, not a familiar face to be seen, among a sea of black people, many of whom had never seen the inside of a school. Some of these families had roots dating back to slavery on this same plantation. They had been bounded to the land. If the land was sold, they went with it. We had just been studying about slavery in Professor Drake's classrooms. So when I made a comparison to what I had been studying in class and the situation that I found myself in, I could see no difference. I said to myself, this is unadulterated modern-day slavery. I saw the kind of poverty, illiteracy, bad health, lack of food, nutritious or otherwise, infant mortality seemed to be the order of the day. That I never could have imagined. I saw a white foreman enter a black man's house and beat upon him in front of his wife. I saw my father lose his power and control over his family. So I did leave and got my breath for 4 years, and I came back to Mississippi to see what I could continue to do. Then I left again because I saw that a lot of people that I had worked with, had a lot of respect for, had compromised the struggle to be on boards where the money was flowing. So it's time. There was never a better time than now to band together to fight. The election of Obama shows the possibilities. It's the evidence of the possibilities of what can be done. But we haven't made it yet. This is just the beginning. And we must continue to fight. We must continue to struggle. And I say to you tonight, I thank you so much. I love you so much, Charleston. But we must fight on. We must be brave and courageous and have not just belief, we must have faith in God. Faith is different from belief. Belief is a good place to start, but then you have to develop it into faith where you know that God is with you every step of the way. I thank you for inviting me back home to Charleston. I love you, Charleston. Thank you so much, because by the grace of God and a few Elam switches, you made me what I am, and I thank you.
Let's thank Mr. Peacock again. Freedom isn't free. And we all have to know that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one footstep, and you made that possible. Next on the agenda, we will go straight through and have the introduction of a chapter's presidents by Mrs. Eula Campbell Johnson, Charleston Chapter President.
Thank you. As I call these chapters presidents, would you please stand? Atlanta chapter, Tommy Batiste. Chicago chapter, Matt Green. Cleveland chapter, Edna Taylor. Annapolis chapter, Morgan Kegler Jr. Milwaukee chapter,